Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Strange Magic. It is a terrible, horrible turd of an animated movie, but it's also kind of an ambitious one. An ambitious one that totally fails on those ambitions and helps make an already bland and terrible script and idea even worse somehow, not thinking about how to use these ambitious ideas for the story rather than just thinking like, hey, we're gonna reinvent the wheel, but not think about why they made the wheel that way in the first place. Why not make a wheel a square? That would work, is kind of the rationale behind Strange Magic. They don't really think about the impact their decisions are having on the film, and it's sad to think when you think about someone trying to do new things with an animated film or try to do something new, and then they fail and make a film that's even more horrible than kind of a generic ripoff. When someone tries to do something that's different than your usual kind of kids movie, and then they fail even worse than those generic copies do, it's like almost that much more depressing and even more painful to sit through. A kingdom, and there are two sides, the dark side and the light side, which is kind of like a typical George Lucas-y thing. Princess Mary Ann, who's voiced by Evan Rachel Wood, who is the fairy princess, is going to be married to her fiance Roland, and they're singing a song, this little mashup thing, and then she discovers that he is cheating on her with another fairy who we never meet again, but she's a plot device. She finds out that he's cheating on her, and then she sings Never Falling in Love by Burt Bacharach and becomes like a goth fairy. And then her sister Dawn wants to fall in love, and she's a big flirt, and this little troll wants to fall in love with her, and the prince wants Marianne to re-fall in love with him so he can be the king and have an army. Why he wants an army? He just wants an army. I've never had that need to like have an army, but I don't really watch football, so maybe that's like a thing. I don't know. So he decides to make a love potion, but you have to go to the dark side to get the things to make it, and you have to free the sugar plum fairy who's in captivity. And then the troll goes and gets her to make a potion and frees her so that they can make the potion. Then the evil king, voiced by Alan Cumming, doesn't like that, so he comes and steals Dawn, even though she's been hit by this potion. She starts falling in love with the evil king, and Marianne tries to save her sister, and this army starts to go too, and they have to save her before Moondown, because when Moondown happens, he'll like kill Dawn or something. I don't know. Strange Magic tries to do something a lot different. It has a lot more songs than you'd expect from a typical animated film. It uses already established pop songs, which kind of harkens back to what George Lucas did with American Graffiti. It was a big deal when he directed American Graffiti, and he actually had pop songs from the past, and it didn't have a regular score. It was a big deal at the time. American Graffiti has a great soundtrack. The soundtrack to Strange Magic is like the opposite of good soundtrack. Like, imagine you got a really good mixtape from somebody from the past, and you're like, man, I wonder if that guy made a mixtape now, what it would be like. And then you realize that guy's grown up and had a daughter, and she went off to college, but she left her iPod in the minivan, and he decided to listen to it and got really way too into it than he should have. That's the soundtrack to Strange Magic. It has Kelly Clarkson, it has a mashup of a Beyonce and Elvis song. It's kind of Glee-ish, but like way worse than Glee somehow. It tries to do mashups, it tries to do show-tuney versions of all these pop hits, but doesn't seem to really understand what made them so interesting. And the other thing about all the songs in this film is that the way this film is structured and the way this film is plotted out just doesn't really work for character, which is odd when you think of this came from the mind of George Lucas, as they say, because every time I think of how a big movie can have a character moment, I think of that moment in the original Star Wars where Luke is looking out at the suns on Tatooine, and everyone in the audience knows what he's thinking, that he wants to grow up and he wants to live somewhere else. Everyone knows that character moment. It's an important character moment. There are no character moments like that in Strange Magic. It just goes so quickly and so into its plot because it's like Insecure. It knows this is a terrible movie. It knows it has nothing to stand on. So it's just going through all these songs immediately. But it's like they don't really know what they're using the music for. You have to really understand how you're using the music in your musical. It's an interesting idea to use pop songs with that, and apparently it used the person who helped make Moulin Rouge the way it was. Strange Magic found a much worse way to use pop songs and redo them and have them fit the movie. You're hearing so many different terrible versions of pop songs. It's just killing any momentum or any likability of this movie. I actually, when I was watching this film, I had to go to the bathroom. And when I go to the bathroom during a movie, I take all my stuff with me, like my coat, because like I'm paranoid. annoyed. I'm sure no one would actually steal it, but I do that. When I put on my coat, and it was early in the film, and I knew, like, you know, I'm not gonna hold it through Strange Magic. It was already pretty terrible. I get up and put my coat on, and I noticed a lot of other people went, oh, well, if this guy's leaving, I'm fucking leaving too. And like a bunch of people left with me. I came back, but a lot of people left, so I might have been responsible for a little bit of a walkout with Strange Magic, which if you're gonna walk out of a movie early, it was pretty clear pretty quickly this was terrible. The other thing about Strange Magic is that it does something that I've never seen a film about kind of smaller creatures who live, you know, much smaller than us big humans do. One of the ways that Strange Magic is quite interesting and quite hard to actually get into is it does something pretty unconscious that really just does not let you get into the movie on a very subconscious level. The way they use cinematography in Strange Magic is they kind of make everything look like it's done with a macro lens. That style of photography where everything else is out of focus except for little things, so it looks like they're really tiny and small. And they did that like through the entire movie. And if you look at any other film like A Bug's Life or Ants or Epic, which this is like a much worse version of, or Hoppity Goes to Town or Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, if you look at all those films, it makes it look like to scale if you were that size. So it's easier for you to relate to. To you as an audience member, if you see that these people are small, it's kind of like if you're on the top of a building, a very tall building. What everyone says is, well, look at everyone looks like ants. They look so tiny and they don't look human. And the thing about drama and relating to characters is you have to see some humanity in there. And the way they shot this film made you instantly removed. And I kept wondering why they wouldn't break from that. Certainly, it's an interesting idea. Like, why should you shoot one of these movies like that? That's certainly something that you could at least have an interesting conversation about theoretically. But I'm here to tell you, if they had come to me with that, I'd say, well, here's why, is because we as humans need to relate to other, you know, people as humans. But us as humans don't really relate to bugs. If I see a bug, I go, you go squish now, I'm big and you're small. It kind of goes against relating to characters, because if you had been at that level, which I've seen from all those other films, is I really feel like I'm in that world. But I felt in Strange Magic there was this complete division from me. And cinematography can play at real subconscious level for a film that you don't really realize. And when you think about what Strange Magic did and when it's removing you from the story in such a way with the camera, that there's no way you could really get into it. It did really feel like I was removed, like I was watching something that was not even plausibly relatable. Now, certainly the terrible script and the terrible music and the terrible acting and the awful character design that looked like somebody put a Brad doll and a Barbie doll together and microwaved them didn't help either. But the cinematography just held it back to such a degree that they came about it in such idiotic, completely terrible ways that it just makes it this unwatchable piece of shit. Now, everybody's gonna say this is George Lucas's fault. Now, here's the thing. George Lucas did develop this for like apparently over a decade. He was just story and executive producer. It was directed by Gary Rydstrom, who has won an Oscar for sound 7 times and actually directed the Pixar film Lifted. I'm sure he's talented in other ways, but this film was directed so horribly and just unwatchably bad. And the character designs in this look both ugly for the main characters, and then the lesser characters look like they're from those fantasy games that show up in advertisements when you go on a torrent site. Not that I go on those, I'm just saying, like, from a friend I have has told me about that. The character designs were really horribly ugly, and there's just like nothing to really take away from this film. And Strange Magic, although it tries so many different things, fails miserably. It is just such a bad movie. It's so hard to watch. The songs are awful and terrible. The sad thing is if someone's trying to be ambitious and trying to do something new, you kind of want to just reward them for like at least trying to kind of give a shit. But they tried so many different things. It's like, I'm not sure if they like just came up with their ambitions really quickly and then went to lunch and had someone else figure this out, or they're that stupid, or they did spend a lot of time on it and they just like really suck at making this movie. I just don't know with Strange Magic. There's so many things like wrong with it. I did like that Super Dave Osborne was the voice of one of the henchmen. That's it. That's all there is. It's just such a terrible, horrible animated film. It's probably one of the worst animated films I've seen in years and years. And I know everyone's pointing out that Disney definitely had to release this because Disney bought Lucasfilm, and then Lucasfilm finally put this into production because they knew it could get released. And it's like part of the Lucasfilm buyout contract that they'd have to release this. But it does certainly reek of that because it is a bad bad movie. Strange Magic just doesn't really understand how to connect to audiences. It doesn't understand what makes humor good in animation. It just makes like dumb, terrible kid humor, which isn't really good for kids because after they're like 5, they'll realize this movie is not funny. The music doesn't really work for it. The cinematography that makes it hard to get into. The whole story and plot of it is terrible. It is just one of the worst animated films because it just does not want to connect with you. It's just a really incredibly misguided movie that they thought this could work on any level and relate to anyone, and anyone could really get into it, because there's just no way you really could. There's nothing to really like about this movie. Afterwards, I think my brain hurt just because it felt bad for the rest of me for having to sit and be exposed to that movie. So if you have seen Strange Magic and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.